This is the Fantasy Roadshow.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Fantasy Roadshow. This episode is brought to you by Rule 1 Proteins. If you're looking to get back in the gym or just looking to re-up your supplement game, go check out Rule 1 Proteins. They get the best protein powder, the best supplements, the best vitamins, you name it, they got it. Go check them out at www.rule1proteins.com. Thanks for clicking on the video. Please like and subscribe to the channel. You guys know the drill. My name is Truck. I'm joined, as always, by Kulz and Shane O'Mac. And today we have a very special guest for you guys. One of the hosts for the Dynasty Football Podcast for the football guys, and also a host for the Devy Royale. We have the one and only Kevin Coleman. Kevin, how you doing, buddy?
Hey, I'm doing good. I feel comfortable. I see Dallas Cowboys in the screen. So anytime I see Dallas Cowboys, I'm on board there. I feel like we have a good connection.
I told them, like, I figured like the first 45 minutes of this show should just be Cowboys free agency and draft talk. And then if we get maybe like 10 minutes of rookie talk, that'd be fine.
Let's do it. Let's
definitely not. We just had our Cowboys episode, and then we had a free agency episode, and there was too much Cowboy talk in that about predictions of running backs.
Mike, don't you know there's never too much Cowboy talk? Never too much Cowboy talk.
Our feed is flooded right now on Instagram with shorts from Cowboys. So I actually messaged Shane. I was like, Shane, let's keep it light on the Cowboys talk, and let's focus on Devy and rookies, which is why we're here. But yeah, first we just wanted to get to know you and have our listeners. I mean, obviously you're huge in the space, but a little bit about the background of where you're from. Where your Cowboys fandom came from, how what you do in fantasy, and kind of how you made your entrance into the fantasy space. So yeah.
Yeah, really, as far as where I'm from California, kind of. I bounced around a lot. I was a single mom for a lot of my years, so we kind of moved a bunch. But I'm from Chico, California, where Aaron Rodgers is from. I actually went to school with Jordan Rodgers, his brother. So I'm kind of familiar with that whole family. Played football out there, Chico, as well. And just generally, California's where I'm at. Where my Dallas fan, I'll just get out of the way quick, okay? So you guys don't yell at me. But where my Dallas fandom comes from, I didn't have a dad growing up, so my grandpa was kind of that male figure in my life. He was a huge Dallas fan. He's from Texas. My uncle is actually just retired as a University of Texas professor. So that side of his family is all from Texas. And so, we just kind of grew up together. Unfortunately, until he passed away when I was 10 in a drunk driving accident. He was hit by a drunk driver. But that's where I bleed blue from him. Like, that's kind of where it comes from. He was a huge Emmitt Smith fan. That's why my ad on Twitter is @DuBois_22. That's really where it comes from. As far as fantasy, I just kind of fell into this. Like, I was not looking for, a few years ago. I literally started Twitter just to talk about Dallas Cowboys. And that's all I did. When COVID hit, I was just like, I just want to argue with Dallas fans because they're irrational. I was like, I just want to get on there and argue with it. And then fantasy came along just by kind of sheer luck. I just kind of was in some leagues. I don't know if you guys know who John Bauer is. He does Dynasty Theory. He's kind of in this fantasy space too. I was just in a league with him, and he used to always drop his stupid podcast in there and like all this stuff. And he used to bother me all the time. And he's like, hey, you should really join like the fantasy community. I was like, is this a hoax? Like, what are you doing to me right now? Am I getting punked? Like, there's no fantasy community. And he's like, no, it's in there and everything. So really, like, him, Mitch, the guys over there were the first people that I followed. And it just slowly kind of snowballed into that. So I just started writing for different sites, just kind of doing stuff with Devy that we're going to talk about, college football kind of stuff. Got picked up by Fantasy Pros a couple years ago. And then basically like that next 3 months later, Football Guys offered me a kind of like a part-time role, full-time / role kind of with them. And I've been doing content with them ever since.
Well, you definitely slid the Cowboys in there again and how you got into fantasy. So we've now heard Dallas Cowboys at least mentioned 4 times.
It's for the algorithm.
Or
the algorithm.
Yeah.
Love that. Love that.
I guess in Truck's intro next time, is it fair to say we can add bachelorette extraordinaire since you were friends with Jordan Rogers.
Well, I didn't say I was friends, so let's not put that out in the universe. I knew him. He was very sponsored by Nike as he came in and did those things. But yeah, I mean, it's you could always throw it in there. Anything for the algorithm. I just want to help you guys out. Yeah, bachelorette, bachelor, whatever you want to do in there.
Perfect. So yeah, Devy, you mentioned that you're kind of Devy expert. I would say that's how we first connected on Twitter was you kind of drop in the Devy mock drafts. I think I grabbed your attention a couple of times by having some pretty outrageous first round draft picks. I remember one being maybe Quinny, whereas I don't recall the exact moments, but yeah, give us a rundown on Devy and kind of your presence in that space.
Yeah, that's how I started. So to go back to like how I started, I'm big in Devy. Now, if you don't know what Devy is, Scott Fish actually started it. Like he was the creator of it when it first came out. And all it is, to keep it simple, is if you had a fantasy team with a taxi squad, it's like a minor league team. You can draft college players and keep them on your taxi squad. That's the basics of Devy. So you can go as deep as you want, or you can go as shallow as you want. So a lot of Devy leagues, they just have 1 round Devy drafts. I'm in some that you can actually draft high school players. So you can go as far or as deep or as shallow as you want there. If you're new to the format, just go shallow. Just do 1 round where you can draft next year's guys. So like Shedeur Sanders, Travion Henderson, some of those guys. And you can do it different ways. You can include them in a startup draft. So if you start a league now, you can have those guys included. But my favorite way to do it is just to do a draft afterwards. After your startup draft, you have another draft, because who doesn't love drafting? That's the big thing. Like everybody loves to draft. And then you have them as draft capital. You can move them. So like, for example, you can trade Shedeur Sanders if you drafted him last year in your dynasty draft. And the one thing it does is it does increase trades, which is cool because dynasty, you're all about trading and all of that. So it adds assets, adds a little bit of like, I think strategy too. Like, and I think it's really for those guys that dynasty is getting kind of, I don't want to say boring because that's a bad word, but just like we're all degenerates in a way. So we're like, hey, what's next? Like, what's that next step? I don't want to fully go into college fantasy because it's a little crazy. Even for me, like college fantasy, I just do best ball because I'm not trying to do like start sits from Akron. Like that's not what I'm doing like my life. Like I do not have that much time. So Devy just allows you to like follows the top guys in college football. You could trade them, you can put them on the roster. And that's really all it is. And it's fun to do. That's kind of how I got my start in terms of the space overall, just because I played those leagues for a long time, in terms of like since 2015, 14, I've been playing in Devy leagues before I even became like anything like analyst. I put that in quotes. So that's kind of how I started, but I love the format. It's fun. I wouldn't get, too many leagues out there. Like don't overextend yourself, but doing 1 or 2, I think it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm a big college football guy, so I kind of have like a little bit of an idea into Devy, I feel like, but certainly didn't know the addition that it adds to the dynasty leagues. I love the idea of adding another element and another draft. Like you said, drafting is like, that's why I do the underdog drafts and plan on maxing out entries this next year, is because like I'm just a draft room fiend, right? All the moving parts. So adding that element and just like another thing to watch on Saturdays, right? So that's awesome. I appreciate that. And yeah, that's why we brought you on. It made perfect sense to have you for our rookie rankings and rookie draft prospects heading into the draft. So I think we can just kind of jump right in and start with the quarterbacks. It seems to be a unanimous number 1, but I want to hear what you have to say about, that top 5. I think top 8 is kind of where there seems to be a pretty big tier break for me, at least. So why don't you jump in and get us started on quarterbacks?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I see out there a lot of is like a lot of people are sure about quarterbacks. And I don't know how we can be sure when so many guys miss. Just look what happened today. Mac Jones just got traded for a 6th round pick. You have Trey Lance out there, unfortunately, still on the Cowboys. Sorry, didn't mean to say Cowboys again, but he's still out there. Fields, people are talking about him not being a starter maybe next year. Like, so that class, which was supposed to be the class, is struggling right now. And it kind of has similarities to this. Caleb Williams supposed to be generational and all of those things. So like, for me, it's going to come down to how that team builds around them and how they can overcome their situation if they're put in a bad situation. But like right now, like from fantasy perspective, I think Caleb and Jaden are my top 2 guys just from fantasy because I like Jaden Daniels. It's weird because I loved him at Arizona State when he first got there because I played Devy, so I knew all about him. I was like, oh, this guy. And then he struggled. Then at LSU, you really saw him develop, which you like to see there. But I think from a fantasy perspective, you have to like that. Then I kind of have like a tier-ish, and then I have Drake sitting there kind of by himself. I don't know if I love the commander spot. I don't like Cliff Kingsbury. So like my hesitation is I actually knew someone that actually coached with him, Cliff Kingsbury, and we were at the live draft in Vegas for the SFB, the Scott Fish Bowl, and he was talking about him, and they were saying that Cliff Kingsbury uses like high school scheme. Like his schematics is like high schoolish. And like when he was at Arizona, they really figured that out quickly. And that's why you saw that decline. And if he's going to bring that same crap to the Commanders, which hey, go ahead. I love that. The Commanders can suck for the rest of my life. I don't care. But that really makes me worry about Drake May in terms of his development. And then I have JJ and Bo Nix kind of sitting there. I will say the one guy that I like probably, like you said, the top 8 that I think could be kind of a sneaky grab in rookie drafts right now is Michael Pratt. I like Michael Pratt from Tulane. I think that, he had a very good year last year, 2 years ago, excuse me. But last year you saw a dip in his production there, but very, very can get ball in tight windows and timing anticipation, the stuff that you like to see from probably that high end backup that maybe can find a starter role. So as you start going down into the quarterback rankings there, I like Pratt. But overall, I think my rankings are pretty much, I don't want to say consensus, but pretty close to the same until we find out where these guys go. I think JJ is the biggest question mark.
Yeah, absolutely. As an LSU guy, go Tigers. I do love Jaden Daniels. I think from a, like you said, fantasy perspective, he's got a really good shot at being really at the only guy that can take down Caleb in this draft as that high end talent with rushing upside. His arm is good and he's accurate. The one thing that he needs to develop is just not getting hit. He gets hit a lot at LSU and some pretty bad ones. So has to learn to be smarter. Game's certainly faster, but as you said, I mean, you never know with these quarterbacks because the game is that much faster and they have to go through the reads quicker. They have to get the ball out. That's the knock on Justin Fields right now is he hasn't been developing that part of his game. And you see that in a lot of quarterbacks. So I have Caleb number 1. I think he's going to be outstanding. I do believe he is a generational talent. And I think he will have a Stroud-esque year 1. Hopefully with the Bears being a Chicago guy. And then I have Jaden Daniels at 2, Drake May at 3, just because of his, he's got all of the profile to be a successful quarterback in the league. My 4 is surprising, and I'm not industry consensus almost ever. I think I get knocked for that a lot, but it's successful for me. I've always been successful in fantasy leagues, and I have Spencer Rattler at 4. I just think he has the talent and the skill set to potentially jump a few of these next guys like McCarthy. I'm not a big believer in just because I don't think he had to do that much at Michigan. Not to say that he can't. Penix, I don't think is good. I think his arm, as you saw against Texas, was his best game, and he has an incredible arm talent. But if you pressure him, I don't think he really is a very effective quarterback. And then rounding that out, I have Joe Milton and Bo Nix, who, again, I just don't believe in Bo Nix's talent to put it together at the professional level. But what do you think about Rattler? I mean, I'm sure he wasn't on your, top five radar, but do you think he has a skill set to succeed in the NFL?
Yeah, I mean, he to me, he's sitting at 8 for me. So it's not crazy to see that. I think the thing with Rattler is really it was between the eyeballs, right? Like for him, it was the maturity stuff. So and I can't see that. So I don't know what that's going to look like. If he's figured that out, the attitude, those type of questions, he gets to the NFL, he's definitely got the tools, right? Because we've seen the tools since high school. I think QB1, he was on that guy coming out of senior year. Really good at arm strength, I think above average. And he's really good thrown with anticipation. And he's very good at running an offense when he's in that system, and he doesn't have to he's the opposite of Caleb. Caleb is very off script, off platform, just kind of rolls out. He's going to find his own things. Rattler is very in system guy. And I think some teams are going to like that he can play in a system and do those things. And so, I don't mind it. I still think, third, fourth round would be ideal ceiling for him. If he can get in that range, then I mean, he's pretty cheap now. If you're looking at rookie drafts right now, he's going like fourth round in Superflex drafts. So if you want to kind of take a shot on one of these guys later, it's not a bad way to go, especially with number one quarterback of his class. That matters in terms of, we're talking 5-star guys, how they develop in the NFL. You're looking at that. I love the tools that he has. It's just, does he fix that maturity? That's the big thing for me with Spencer.
Yeah. You mentioned one guy I have just gone back and forth on, with this class, and that's JJ McCarthy. And the whole year I thought, this is mostly just kind of a system guy. Doesn't really show very much, doesn't have to show much. But then, ever since the end of the year and through the combine, you have just heard more and more buzz around him more than any other person, really, that he has shot up the boards. And a lot of it from, what you hear is more about that pre-snap stuff. So his abilities to call plays on his own, read pre-snap coverages prior. And then I think the weight at the combine was a positive for him, coming in I think it was 219, which is heavier than most people thought. Do you think it is he's a guy now that slips into the top 10 for sure?
Oh, I don't think it's for sure, because remember Malik Willis 2 years ago when people were talking about Malik and being number one, and it's a different class though. So this is definitely a different class, because I think there's top guys in this class as opposed to Malik's class. But I think that JJ could. It really depends on what these teams, when you look at the quarterback position, I think the one thing that helps the quarterbacks maybe slip in the top 10 is that there's not that much talented edge rushers in this class. I love Dallas Turner and some of these other guys, but that top end edge guy's not there. So I do think the offensive tackles are loaded. So that's definitely going to be interesting to see how teams kind of roll there. But I think some teams are desperate. The Raiders are desperate. The Broncos are desperate. There's some very, very desperate teams. The Vikings, how free agency plays out. So if those teams, Raiders, I mean, they're always desperate, right? That's just the reality.
Seahawks are getting desperate.
Yeah, those teams are very desperate. So how free agency plays out, I do think that if some teams are sitting there and, number 7 is wide open, or, hey, possibly when you're thinking of the Giants, I think the Giants are in a very perfect trade back scenario with them at 6. If you're looking at those areas, that's why I think JJ could slip into the top 10. Now, as far as him, for me, I'm very hesitant because I've watched him his whole career. I am a Michigan fan, so I have watched JJ even in high school. I comped him to Stafford when he was coming out for Fantasy Bros. One of my first articles, I said he has Stafford tools in high school when he played IMG, and I think he still does. But I think his floor is the scariest of this class. I've always said it, I think that he could be a really good Daniel Jones, and really good Daniel Jones, oh, okay, a back end QB1 in fantasy, or he could be Desmond Ridder. I really think that those are two very, very realistic landing spots for JJ. So to me, if he finds himself in a Shanahan, McVay, McDaniels tree, or Slowlick, or one of those guys out there, if someone kind of goes, or I love O'Connell's offense, I think he'd be great for the Vikings. If he finds himself there, I'm more in. But if he goes to a system where he's not going to be able to be that guy, and he doesn't have the timing anticipation, that West Coast kind of centric themes, I'm more concerned, because he's not a slinger. He's not a guy that goes out deep balls, little suspect at times. So that's really where I land with JJ. A lot of question marks based on where he's going to land.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a quick question for you. I have Michael Penix inside my top 5. I do think he's going to be a good quarterback in the NFL. But I have heard rumblings throughout this offseason that he is one of the potential names that could fall in the draft. And my question for you is, he obviously led the nation in passing yards. He was runner-up in Heisman voting. What happened from the end of the college season to now where that he's the potential name that could be fallen, in your opinion?
He's 25.
He's definitely older.
Injured multiple times, some bad injuries.
I think the thing with him is, I think the 2 ACL and 2 shoulder injuries are definitely something that teams are going to look at and say, hey, he's sitting there at 25 coming into the year. He has that. I think my biggest concern with him is his lower body mechanics. Like he uses a lot of his arm strength. Everything is really like upper body, shoulders, and just arm when he's throwing the ball. His mechanics struggle when he gets pressured. Now, when you go to his actual pressure rates and PFF and all of that, it looks really good. But Washington had one of the best offensive lines in the country. I'm pretty sure they won the offensive line award over Michigan this year. And they kept him upright. Now, when he faced Michigan, though, and that defensive line and pressure, you kind of saw that inconsistencies in his ability to get the ball out consistently deep. I think he has the arm strength, but under pressure, he really, really struggles. He's not very good limit on mobility wise and all of that. Not to say that like I would love to see him go in a second round to like the Raiders or the Seahawks though. Like those systems, especially with Grubb, his former offensive coordinator in Seattle, like those spots could excite me a little bit more because they know how to maybe utilize him. Maybe they get the ball out quickly, little things like that. I don't hate it. I mean, I will never talk bad about anybody's rankings at quarterback because none of us know what we're talking about. We could say we know what we're talking about, but like, I think there's a lot of things that come into play. So for me, context is important for Michael. I think it's like, hey, he goes to Grubb. Oh, he has that ability. He knows that system already. Oh, he has 3 legitimate wide receivers out there with him. Oh, he can sit a little bit. Like he has that experience. All right, I'd be more on board. But I do think the injuries are more than what people think. Like I think that those injuries are definitely something the NFL looks like because they were bad. I mean, I'm pretty sure he had to take a piece of his like something and put something somewhere. I forget what the surgery was, but he definitely had to replace some tendons and stuff. So like to me, that's going to be the red flag. Kind of reminds me of Carson Strong from a few years ago when he had to completely redo his knee. That was a big reason why the NFL is like, I'm out. But I do think that's probably where the teams are at with him.
Okay.
Yeah, I think his best landing spot for me would be the Seahawks because of how many weapons there are and ability to throw the ball. But I'd be extremely concerned about the when you do rush him and make him like use his legs, but also just move around in the pocket. It's never been a strong suit of his. So his arm is accurate when he has time, but there are a lot of question marks surrounding that. Shane, what do you have in your top 8?
So it's similar. The only difference I had was I had Drake May at 2 over Daniels. It's a lot of the things people like about Caleb Williams. I see with Drake May too, those off-platform plays. He's got the size and everything. I think Daniels could still grow into that size, kind of like we saw with Lamar. I think he's got the frame to put on some weight, so I'm not that big of concern. I did flop JJ into 4, just based off of what has been talked about him, that I really wasn't taking into account. The guy I've got at 5 is Bo Nix, and that's very specific to my mind. Like, I think he's got a chance to succeed if he's going to a place like Denver. Seems ideal to me in the first round with their pick. When you got somebody like Sean Payton and somebody like Nix who's going to just execute on what's called, like what he did at Oregon, looked over, he calls the plays. That's what Sean Payton, I think, wants in a quarterback. I don't think he wants his quarterbacks going off script. So then I've got Nix, Penix, 7's Rattler, and then Pratt at 8.
Yeah, my top 8 is very similar to that. Caleb at number 1, go Bears. Jaden Daniels 2, Drake May 3, and then I had JJ at 4, Penix to round out my top 5. Bo Nix, Spencer Rattler, and Michael Pratt. So that's kind of my 8. But we all talked about those, so all good.
Okay. That rounds out quarterbacks. I think that's, it's more of a conversation there. Like you said, nobody truly knows. Running backs, I think it's kind of the same thing with running backs. To be honest, it's going to be all situational. So our rankings here, in my mind, are going to be probably the most inaccurate out of the bunch, just because it is so landing spot driven here. But Kevin, why don't you start us off here with running backs and talk about, again, kind of a top 8 again. Top 8 to 10 is where I see another tier break here.
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is when we're talking about these guys, especially the running back position, I'm not doom and gloom like with the running backs. I think that the skill set matters, right? So like a lot of these guys have very, very good skill sets. And it, like you said, landing spot's really going to matter. I think it just comes down to like, all right, talent wise when you're ranking. So here's my top 8. Now full disclosure, we do a rookie guide for football guys where we write 154 players pre-combine after the Senior Bowl and do all that stuff. I got the short straw. I had to do running backs this year. So I watched over 38 running backs. I have all 22 and all of that. My eyes were bleeding at the end of it. And I still was like, I don't know where these dudes are at. And I've been watching these guys in college and all of this. And so this is where I kind of, after the combine, these are my post-combine rankings that are going out in the second version. I have Jalen Wright at Tennessee running back at 1. I had him there before the combine too. That was kind of like a hot take by me, but I just look at explosiveness. I saw what I liked on tape there. And I also saw like, hey, could be like that 3-down guy if he has a good combine. I think he did have a good combine, so I'm okay putting him there. MarShawn Lloyd and Trey Benson at 2 and 3 in terms of there. And then Jonathan Brooks at 4. I think that's okay in terms of that range for him. I think he'd probably be 1 if he didn't tear his ACL. So I do like Jonathan Brooks there. And I got Braylon Allen at 5. And I used to be a Braylon Allen hater. But like what I did for this is I really took out all my priors, because we used to have a joke in our Patreon that he should play edge because he'd probably be the number 1 pick. But like I was like, all right, I'm gonna take out the Braylon Allen jokes and the whatever, and just look at what I see there. And what I see there is can be a 3-down bruiser, and I'm not a great pass catcher, never gonna do that, but he definitely can just be that guy that scores touchdowns for a team and find a role there. So I do think that because of his size, he's only like 20. I think he's 20, 21 in that range. You have to put him in your top 5 probably, just based on maybe the potential there. Corum sitting there for me at 6, and I might be a little low for some. But again, I think that it's really going to come down to landing spot for him. And I still have Audric Estime sitting there. I think that, what he did in the combine does not reflect what the tape says, because he is athletic, but I don't know. Combine numbers and all of that didn't really show there. I think he's still running his 40 actually. And then Kendall Milton at 8. And then Kendall Milton to me, this is probably a heart pick here, because I do love Kendall because he's out here from Fresno. It just was injured a lot of times in that range. I think Kendall may definitely be a rotational back. Shipley is sitting there for me. Irving, those type of guys are definitely there. So that's kind of how I round out my top 10. But definitely a lot of movement going to happen once the draft occurs.
Let's hear about MarShawn Lloyd. You had him at 2. I think that would say is a little bit off industry consensus as well. So I love hearing about why you're so bullish on him.
To me, he's just a very, when I look at him, he could be a 3-down guy too, because I think he can definitely, catch passes when you're looking at what he's been able to do there. Very versatile when he was at USC and South Carolina. He can run inside zone, outside zone, power concepts. He does it all. He did it all throughout his career there. So you have to like that. I think that he can do also multiple, but he can also be a grinded out guy, 3rd-down guy. I think he's a pretty good pass catcher and pass blocker. So I think teams will have him out there. So for me right now, with like a pre-draft ranking with Lloyd, it's like, hey, he could be utilized a lot of different ways. And that's what you'd like to see from these guys pre-draft. Okay, hey, he's going to be, a team can look at him being, hey, a 3-down guy, or hey, the 1st and 2nd down runner that can gain yards, especially the tough yards. I think that, he's very efficient with breakaway ability too. 4.46 is a pretty good 40 for him. I think that's fine in terms of what we're looking for there. And I think if he didn't tear his ACL at South Carolina, we could be talking about him being like consensus. Oh, wow. Yeah. Running back 1. Okay. MarShawn Lloyd there. Didn't have a ton of usage last year. That offense at USC was not great for him. But I love him as a runner. Instinctive, changes levels, can get to the 2nd level pretty quickly. And that's just generally speaking, can be a 3-down guy. I'm okay putting him in the top 3.
Yeah, again, I'm not very confident on my rankings here, just because I think it's going to look a lot differently once we see landing spots. But I have Benson at 1. It could be a heart pick at 2. I have Brooks. I think if he tears ACL, we'd be talking at him as surefire RB1. So I think because of the injury and a little steam off of him and just running backs as a whole, this is a wide receiver draft. So in these rookie drafts, you're going to have very top heavy wide receiver picks, and then you're going to have some value here if you can get a guy like Brooks that rehabs correctly, ends up in a good spot. Maybe I don't know, I'm just going to throw out names, but something like a Chargers, who is going to look for a run heavy offense that can kind of balance things out with Herbert's arm, something like that. Like that could be an outstanding pick for you. So I have Benson, Brooks, and then I actually have Jalen Wright as well, pretty high. I had him at 4 after Estime, Bucky Irvin, Braylon Allen, because of what you said, he could go to maybe like a Titans who just had Derrick Henry and it wants another bruiser in there and kind of reestablish that hard-nosed Vrabel type culture. Corum, that's landing spot. If he ends up with the Chargers and Harbaugh, I think that's his best bet. Someone who's familiar with them, that is going to want to use him and getting them in the end zone. And then I actually had Dylan Johnson just because I think his athleticism and explosive ability is there. So I think he could be a guy that has like a Pollard-esque type role where he comes in and puts him in space to make plays. But he's had a little bit of injury, unfortunate situations in college. So that's my top 8. Again, didn't want to spend too much time there because it's gonna be completely different after the draft. So
yeah, and one of my favorite things about the draft is finding out where these running backs go. It's like one of my favorite things about the draft, that these pieces where they fall into place. So I'm excited to see where they end up. But I have Jonathan Brooks at 1. I do think he is one of the best talents in the running back room. But Jalen Wright I have at 2. At 3 I have Blake Corum. At 4 I have Bucky Irving. I think Bucky's the greatest pass catcher in this class, and I think that we know how that translates to fantasy football. I think if he lands in the right spot, he's going to be a force to be reckoned with. After him, I have Trey Benson at 5, Audric Estime at 6, and MarShawn Lloyd at 7, and Braylon Allen at 8. I really like Braylon Allen. He's probably going to climb up my ranks depending on where he goes. Just a beast of a player. So that's kind of my top 8.
Truck, you like him because he was jacked in that one picture.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. Yeah, that one really got me.
As the fantasy trucker, you just like that Mack truck type style, and that's Braylon Allen for you.
100%.
Yeah, my rankings are pretty much the same. I'm not going to run through it, but Kevin, my question for you with this class overall, to me, it feels like a kind of deep class, but not a very top heavy as far as elite players. So in my mind, I think there's some value to be had in drafts. Do we see any of these guys go in round 2, or is this a round 3 and later for most of these guys?
Oh, I would be shocked. I think the one guy that could be round 2 is Trey Benson because of the combine. Because he really kind of 4.39 for Trey was something that I don't think a lot of people saw in terms of the tape there. So if anybody was to kind of go after a guy like that, it would be probably Trey. Jonathan probably would have been that area. And I love that you said the landing spots for him, because I put Chargers, Vikings, and Giants for Jonathan Brooks in the draft for my landing spots I like. Trey, same thing. I think Trey, Ravens, Chargers, possibly. I would love that. I even put the Panthers down, but I don't know, because that second round, they only have 1 pick. I don't know if they'd waste it on a running back in terms of that. But I think that Trey would be the one guy to me. That's why I go back and forth on my rankings too. Cause if I'm saying that now, Trey should probably be my running back 1. Right. But I'm a coward and I'm a hypocrite. So I'll keep him at 3 for now. But I think that, he definitely could go in that range. I think we're looking at a lot of 3 to 5 round guys in that range, and probably a lot of 4th round guys. And that's the other thing too, that I was going to mention with the running backs, is I think, we get in this mindset of it has to be a day 2 guy, but I think that we're done with that now, because I think the way that the position's getting devalued throughout everything, fantasy football, in general, just in terms of where they're getting drafted, I think we have to start looking at 4th round guys as being okay. Maybe even possibly early 5th round guys, just what we've seen them be able to do in the league. Because really running backs in fantasy, especially dynasty, is what can they do for me the next day? We're not looking at these guys as being assets for longer than 2 years. I'm not. When I'm drafting these guys, it's hey, I'm going to churn them, and I'm going to churn them as fast as I can if I got to move off of them. So if they are 4th round guys, I think that's okay. If you have a win now team, go grab them, because we've seen these guys in the past. When we're looking at the last couple of years, they've been very relevant and going 4th and 5th round, as long as, and I'll say this, if they have a clear path to running back 2 in the depth chart in August. That's what I look for. If they are running back 2/3 in August, I am much more okay, I'll go grab them. I'm okay with that. I think that there's a role there, but we can miss too. Look at Tank Bigsby. Whoops, we missed on that one because we thought he was going to have a better role with ETN. So there's still definitely risk there involved. But I do think that, a lot of these guys are going to go that 3, 4, 5, probably 4th round is going to be the money round for a lot of these guys. And if that's the case, then that's when we start doing context. You start looking at depth charts. You start really diving into, rotations, coaching staffs, philosophies. And that's where we're going to find our guys that we like.
Yeah, I like that you took shots. You stood by your guy in right and Lloyd there at the top of your rankings. Because I think one of the things that I have a problem with the fantasy industry as a whole is like just going so consensus driven. I mean, just like you said at the beginning, like we're never right. Like it's always just so random, and taking a hard stance on a guy that you believe in, I think, is important in fantasy and going to get them, because anything can happen, right? Like rankings are never the way that they plan on at the beginning of the year, and they're always changing. So, if you believe in a talent, ride them out and take a hard stance on them, So anyways, let's dive into the meat and potatoes here. It's going to be wide receivers. We talked about just the position as a whole in the league right now is hot because it's a passing league. I think that having that high end wide receiver one is becoming such a commodity with the amount of passing that is going on. But you have some here, Odunze, Neighbors, and Harrison that are thought of could be those wide receiver one guys, and then maybe even some fringe like Keon, Coleman, AD, Brian Thomas. So why don't you get into your rankings and tell us where you have these guys falling?
Yeah, so going through here, just the consensus stuff and kind of looking at the ranking, there's a lot of them. There, when you're looking at how many, we did 65 for the rookie guide before the draft. So I have Marvin, Harrison, and Malik to me are tier one. And you could throw Malik. I mean, some people are throwing him ahead of Marvin Harrison Jr. I'm not going to do that, but whatever. They're in the same tier. I don't care. Like, that's fine. Rome to me is probably tier 3 by himself. He's just sitting there. I don't love Rome, but I don't hate him either. Like, I think that he did himself well at the combine. I think he's sitting in that role where he's going to get probably top 10 capital. So I'm good with that. Where my rankings might differ from some, I have Xavier Worthy at 4, and that's been since the pre-combine. So don't yell at me out there for double counting where he runs fast. We already knew he was going to run fast. I knew that. I've been a stand for Xavier Worthy for a long time, and so I do have Xavier there at 4. And part of the reason is because I do think he can play X and in a slot. Like, I think he's very versatile. I don't think he gets enough credit for that. And I swear everybody uses the one time he dropped the ball. Like, they don't know the other times. They just say that he dropped balls, but every time I'm on Twitter, I see the one drop that he had and he had a broken hand, but that's all right. Context gets lost on social media. So like, I'll put Xavier at 4. I like Troy and Brian Thomas pretty much back to back. I put Brian Thomas there. I just get Terrace Marshall vibes. I know the LSU guy is going to yell at me, but like, I just get nervous. Because I like Terrace Marshall as well. But Brian, I sit there with Troy. I put Ladd in there. Adonai Mitchell, I put him at 8. Then really comes down to like, what do you like in your wide receivers? Do they have a role? I'm gonna put Roman Wilson at 9 for me as a Michigan guy too. But coming in at the 40 that he did, sub 4.4, high 4.3. I never thought I'd see that. That's pretty impressive in terms of like because he never saw that in Michigan. I think it was a scheme thing more than anything. And I think that he can play that role of that slot. And then Keon Coleman is sitting outside my top 10, which I don't know if it's a hot take or not. But I really like Ricky Pearsall from Florida. I think that he has a role as well. I thought he tested well. So that's kind of how my top 10 rolls, with Keon sitting outside barely, Xavier sitting outside a little bit, Malik Washington in that range.
You mentioned Worthy being a stan. I believe you might even have him in your profile.
Just to piss people off. That's just to make people mad. That's all.
Yeah, your Twitter profile just has Xavier Worthy in there. His speed is evident. I agree. His hands are great. I watched him all year. I lived down in Austin. I went to probably 4 or 5 games, and his hands are very good. Like, he will get in. He'll run that quick slant and catch the ball in traffic and just is completely confident, and then lets his speed take over from there. So I definitely think he has the highest upside. I have him down at 7, I believe, and that's only and he's the highest upside for me. If he ends up in the Chiefs, he could be like a top 3 pick for me. You mentioned I would yell at you about Brian Thomas, but I'm kind of in the same boat where I think Neighbors is incredible. Like, I would put him above Marvin Harrison. If his name wasn't Marvin Harrison Jr., I would have Neighbors probably ahead of there. Some of that is being a homer, but it's because I think it is that close in their ability. And then same with Rome. But going back to Brian Thomas, like he hasn't been playing football that long, and I think it shows. So he's just kind of a raw talent, and his numbers are there. His athleticism's there. He just needs to get maybe a little bit more advanced in his route running to unlock like his true potential. He runs that streak, and you know he can beat you with the legs, and his size is there, catching ability. The way that he can track the ball once it is thrown up there in the air is kind of a just talent that, you know, isn't learned, but is just instinctively there. So I think he could be another high upside pick. But for me, if Worthy ends up with the Chiefs, you know, I think you can skyrocket him into the top 3. So what do you think there about Worthy and his landing spots? What is ideal? Obviously the Chiefs and Mahomes, but what other spots would you think he would thrive in?
Yeah, I mean, I would hate to go to the Chiefs because I want to get him cheap, and that will not let me get him cheap because the people would just drive his price up. But I mean, obviously, as a stand, I would like him there. For the landing spots in the guide that I wrote down, I actually, I put the Panthers. I think if he maybe fell that second round and be Bryce Young's wide receiver 1, and if they go maybe target somebody, I don't hate him in that role, but that's because primarily I think he can work in multiple spots of the scheme. I think he does have that, like he could be an X type area. So I don't mind that. Cardinals would be interesting if they decide to maybe trade out and not take Marvin Harrison Jr. or whatever they decide to do. I know that there are rumors to go get Deontay Johnson possibly right now. Like, so maybe they're not looking at that number 4 pick. Maybe they're going to go tackle, or maybe they're looking at that second pick in the first round that they have. Falcons, I think, could be fun because with Drake, Pitts, and possibly a quarterback upgrade, what if he went to the Falcons in that range in the second round, possibly there? But I think I would like him to go, I think he fits a lot of different spots. And that's the fun part. I would love, the question is, do you want him to be a wide receiver 1 on a team or a wide receiver 2? And I think he probably would thrive a little bit better at a wide receiver 2 range, just because defenses wouldn't be able to focus on his speed the whole time and take that away from him. And if they can't double coverage him, I think he could definitely kind of do more damage. So for me, it's just, okay, go to a system that you're a wide receiver 2. I'd be really comfortable with that. Probably the best.
So I want to ask you about 2 guys who, when I watched them last year, kind of throughout the season, I saw their production. I was high on them going into the draft this year. And I'm curious on your thoughts after their combines, how far did they drop? And that's Keon Coleman and Troy Franklin. They're both guys who I thought maybe were fringe, low end, first round guys. Where do you see them going now?
Oh, so Keon is a tough one. He didn't drop too far because I kind of already had him kind of low and outside my top 10 before the combine. I think for me, I think that he struggled. Gosh, he's just not fast, man. Like, that's the thing. Like, he does everything else well. Like, I was looking at some metrics. I think Scott Barrett put it out, and how he does all his charts. I don't understand charts very well. I'm not an analytics guy, but he was like putting these charts, and he excels at every single point except for speed. And I'm just like, I just get vibes from receiver. We've seen receivers like this. I'm old enough to see guys like this. They don't succeed at the next level. Like, when they can't separate and they don't have that. I think he's still an athlete. Like, I still think that, he has his vertical ability, gets up there. I think he's very, very good in contested situations, but he struggles to create that separation. And we've seen time and time again, guys don't develop into good wide receivers in the NFL with that. Like, they just don't. And I think that's my concern. Like, here's the thing, though. In rookie drafts, he was going, like, when I first started doing rookie drafts in January, he was going like 107. Now he's going like 211. And like, part of me is like, I'll take the shot at 211. Like, I don't mind taking the risk there, because imagine getting Quentin Johnson at 210 last year, right? Instead of the 107 where people were taking him. So I do think that's where you're at with Keon. As far as Franklin, I'm not as concerned with that. I think that Franklin, I think he had an okay combine. I understand that, like, the drills and all of that, but he's not really that type of receiver. Like, when you're looking at his ability, I think that he does really good in explosion after catch. I don't think the drills highlighted what he does on the field. So that's one of those things where it's more nuanced and probably contextually for me, having watched Franklin at Oregon. I think that he wins at all 3 levels. I think he can work inside and out. I like that he came at 176. That's fine. Oregon always cooks their books. So if you ever watch college football, you will know that their weight and height are never right. So I'm always concerned. Like, Tez Johnson is 155. That man is probably 140. If we're being real, like, he's a wide receiver out there. Like, so Franklin coming at 176 for me, I was like, okay, good. Awesome. I'm okay with that. So, like, I do think, though, Franklin and Keon are both boom or bust guys. So, like, they're either going to hit or I think they will bust out. So like, I do think that's part of it. I would love Franklin to go to the Cowboys. Like, I hope he fell enough to where he does go with CeeDee Lamb, because there's rumors that they were trying to maybe go out there and get a wide receiver or whatever the case may be. If he finds himself in that system, I like that. Maybe the Bills take a shot on him. Maybe they don't go after a wide receiver in that first round, or maybe they like him enough to where they're going to go after them there. But I'm less concerned about Franklin because he's got speed, and I think that he's improved every single season. He has skills, after catch opportunities, those type of things he does well. Keon is definitely the red flag for me. I'm kind of out on that profile. I don't mind missing on a Keon. That's one of those things. Like, if he does well, I don't mind missing on that just based on the value.
Yeah. One guy I have a question about, who I think has a question mark on him, and I had a tough time deciding where to put him in my rankings. It's Tez Walker out of North Carolina. I'm just kind of want to get your gauge on Tez Walker and what you expect out of him.
He should have went back to school, I think. I think that when he came out, and for those of you that don't know, context-wise, he was actually deemed ineligible this last year. He's only played 3 years of college football. Then he came out, and everybody knew about him because he was ineligible. Then he had a balled out his first game. And after that, he kind of disappeared. But everybody's like, oh, that first game, they really like elevated his status a little bit. Yeah. My biggest problem with Devontez Walker is he cannot run routes. He is very limited in his route tree, and he has no refinement there. Like, he's going to need to develop. So if you're looking for a guy that probably needs to develop, it's Walker. Like, he's going to be one of those guys that he struggles with his elusiveness, change of direction. He doesn't do very well there. He kind of reminds me of Hyatt almost, where he can be that he can stretch the defense vertically. He can go get it. He's very good there. He can win at all 3 levels too, and he has good play strength and everything there. But he needs to learn how to play receiver. And I think, when you're looking at where he transferred, Kent State, played a small school, went to North Carolina, struggled last year when he got his opportunity there. Like, to me, I really, really feel like he needed that extra year of refinement and development. And now that he's in there, and in the Senior Bowl, like, there was, reports about just Cecil Laramie. He works for Football Guys. He does stuff for the Denver Broncos and all that. He talked to us about, like, the coaching staffs. He kept forgetting where the plays were. He kept forgetting where to line up. He kept forgetting just things that you don't want your wide receiver to forget about. And then he was talking about how the coaching staff, they were talking about him. The one word they kept using was raw. And that's probably my biggest concern. He's more probably a stash guy. If you can get him in the 3rd round, though, and you believe in the talent, then yeah, you stash him and you hope that he kind of develops there. Because I think one thing that we forget is some of these wide receivers do need time to develop. Like, the whole, Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase and Puka, these guys have just come out of nowhere. They've kind of like soured our view of like the wide receiver position. Oh, you got to break out your first year. The JSN thing going on right now. Everybody's saying, oh, he's a bust. I saw the word bust like 7 times yesterday on JSN. He broke like rookie wide receiver records for the Seahawks. Hey, it is what it is. Like, he's not a bust. Like, these guys deserve some time here.
Geno Smith's his quarterback, so
that too. That doesn't help. And so Walker to me kind of is that stash. Gonna have to develop. He needs some time to develop.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to run through my rankings. I'll just highlight a couple of disagreements that we had. I have Keon Coleman at 4 behind Adunze, and I think you kind of touched on it, that he's boomer bust. I just think he's so damn good. I do have concerns with the speed, but he was wide receiver 1 over there for Michigan State in front of Jaden Reed just a couple seasons ago, goes over to Florida State and just has some unreal catches. His catching ability is great. I do understand your concerns, and I'm ready to swing and miss there, being so bullish on him, but because of his value and how it's kind of tanked through this process, I like it even more. I mean, of course, landing spot's going to end up mattering, but I can see myself drafting a lot of him, especially in keeper leagues, because of how low industry consensus, not necessarily industry consensus, but as a whole, as his draft prospect profile. But one person I did want to touch on was Adonai Mitchell. I think that he is somewhat similar to Keon, but he does have like that speed and that route running ability. So I want to hear what you think about him and where you have him on your rankings.
Yeah, so I like Adonai Mitchell. I'll be the first to say that I have him at 8 right now overall. So when you're looking at him, first of all, I'm kind of a troll when it comes to this. So like he is the perfect analytics versus film debate guy. So he's going to be the guy that answers the question finally, because I think film wise, you love what you see from this tape. Really excels in vertical situations, really good speed, athleticism, 4.34. That's great. That's what you like to see from them. He just big game guy. And I know like analytic guys are going to just shut this podcast off, but like he's a big game dude. Like he just performs well in big games. And that's something I really feel like that's something to say about this kid, especially in the college football playoff. If you watch them down the stretch, Sark went to him in those in that final drive, and he schemed up things for Adonai Mitchell, not Worthy. And I'm a Worthy guy, but Mitchell was the one getting the ball and getting his name called. I think for me, like as an old school kind of guy too, I liked that about him. Like, hey, he was getting the play drawn up for him. They believed in his talent, his ability to kind of stretch the field. I think he plays the ball very well in the air as well. So, like, I think that he is one of the more underrated wide receivers in this class. I think that from a film-based perspective, he is definitely there. Now, the production isn't going to be there, right, because of the injuries that he had. And in last year, I don't know if this is a spoiler alert or not, but Quinn Ewers was pretty bad. Like he was not a very good quarterback last year. And I think part of, the production problems that they had in that team was, the quarterback play in reality. Malik Murphy had to play a couple games too. So that was definitely a problem there. Adonai Mitchell, though, definitely needs to – I don't think his ceiling is here yet as a prospect either. That's why I think I like him, because I do think he has room to grow as a receiver. So I think he's going to have that same thing where he's got to learn the position. I wish he would have came back another year, though, just to develop a little bit, but I get why he did because he tested so well. But with his athleticism metrics and what you see on film, that's a guy that I'll take, like your Keon take. All right, I'll take a shot on Keon because that's what I like to see. For me, Adonai Mitchell's that guy for me. Okay, I like what I saw in film. I like his value going in the second round now. I'll take a shot on him and kind of go for it there.
Yeah, the only other guy I'd like to touch on who just because I feel like I have a very strong stance on him, is Roman Wilson. And again, before the senior day, and I just, every time I watch him, he's just that guy that catches the ball and he's like, oh, he's got NFL qualities. He just has that look to him. So I was high on him. I did not love seeing a lot of people jump on board after the Senior Bowl, and then his value is starting to get kind of squeezed out. But I do think that he's going to be extremely talented in the NFL, and I know you mentioned that as well. But Truck, Shane, do you guys have any wide receivers you want to touch on in your rankings to round out wide receivers?
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to pick Kevin's brain a little bit on someone, Lad McConkey. I see a lot of hype around him. I see he's, in most everybody's top 10. And I didn't watch a lot of his film, and I know you did. That's why I kind of want to lead you to this question. But what is it about his film that really makes him stand out? Because from what I saw, the limited film that I saw, limited games that I watched of his, his stats lines don't really stand out to me. What it is about Lad McConkey that teams seem to be interested in?
He's the next Cooper Kupp, right? That's everything I hear there. So just based on a couple of things, I think the metrics that everybody's going to talk about, yards per route run, 3.26 is one of the best, top 5 in the nation this last year. I think that when you're looking at it from like what he did, now he has a limited production model too. This is why I love analytics, because they hate people that don't have good production, but they love Lad. They love him based on all his yards per route run, all the things that he's kind of doing there. I think for me, he's a very intelligent receiver. So the thing that you need to know about Lad is like his ability to kind of create, separation is there too, but he knows how to play defenses. And I think one thing we're seeing in the NFL is a lot more zone. You're seeing that too high coverage, a lot more zone defenses. Lad will eat that up because Lad knows where to find himself on the field to get open. And I think that's probably why you're seeing a lot of just a lot of talk around him in terms of NFL and execs and all that kind of stuff, is because he knows where to get open and how to get open, kind of like Puka and these other guys that we've seen. And because they're playing zone so much in the NFL, I think that's why Lad is getting the buzz that he's getting. And I think that, Lad should. I mean, he's very instinctual. He's creative. He's dynamic. I think after the catch too is where he excels. So if you're looking from a perspective, he gets open. He gets open in zone where they're seeing a lot of zone coverage now, and he can run after the catch. I mean, that's why he's getting the buzz there. I don't have him as high as some. I mean, he's in my top 8. He's a number 8 for me. I know some have him as like wide receiver 4 or 5, and then they're in that range. But I do think that he's intelligent enough, he's creative enough, and he's just smart. He knows how to, fit roles, and he's going to be able to do that. And he tested well, 4.39, vertical jump at 36, like those type of things. I mean, teams are going to like that.
So the only question I had for you, Kevin, was you mentioned Puka Nacua, and I know it's a lot of it depends on landing spots, but who are a couple of these guys? Who's a couple guys in this draft class in that round, maybe 5 or later, that could come in just based off of their traits and what they can do, whether if it's playing multiple spots, slot or outside, that could have an impact like Puka did last year?
Oh, man, you're going to ask me who have an impact like Puka, almost like the best. No, I'm just joking. For me, Jalen McMillan is a guy that doesn't get a lot of buzz from Washington. Jalen's one of those guys that he was injured last year. So that's why you saw the numbers kind of dip a little bit. He's strictly a slot guy though. So Jalen's probably, he's going to stay in a slot. I think he played like 96% of snaps in slot, something crazy like that. Yeah. But he operates well in space, really can win vertically. 4.47 was fine in terms of where he ran his 40. Really good route runner. The other thing too, the scheme that he was in with Washington, that's very NFL concepts. So he kind of already has that with Grubb, and who's going to be at Seattle anyway now. I think Jalen fits that mode a lot. I kind of comped him and Jalen Polk, the other Washington wide receiver, they kind of remind me of Tyler Boyd, both of them. They just kind of like, they can be that slot guy. They're going to create that value in that range. So McMillan is a guy that's like deeper guy that you definitely want to try to, just see kind of the value where he's at. And I'll give you one guy that really did well on relative athletic score, Ryan Flournoy from Southeast Missouri State. That kid tested extremely well. 4.44, 30, almost a 40-inch vertical, which is insane. Just thinking about what my vertical is not. Like I could only imagine like watching him test. Elite level athleticism. He was on Feldman's Freaks list before the year even started. Very good footwork and route running. Very refined guy. So the thing about Ryan Flournoy is very refined. That was like Puka. Came in very refined. Can kind of create that role for him. He's also very alignment versatile. So for him, he can go inside and out. And 6'1", 202 is pretty good in terms of where he's at, in terms of where he tested out. So our comp for Ryan Flournoy is Brandon Ayuk. In the guide, like I think he can fit that role and that the kind of where you like. He's older. He's an older prospect, like a lot of these wide receivers, these late round wide receivers. But being old, he does have that experience there. And he got a Senior Bowl invitation after he performed really well at the Hula Bowl, which I didn't know was a thing until this year. But he performed well, got to the Senior Bowl, then he got his combine by. So he's kind of worked his way up at every level. Like he just earned those roles. So Ryan Flournoy is another guy to watch.
I love it. So I think one person that I think is going to be a very good football player, Jordan Whittington. I don't know that it'll ever be like fantasy value, but Whittington's a guy that you can put at running back. He's just a sure-handed football player. So I could see him having some sort of like Cordero Patterson type role in the NFL, and could be an interesting, just good football player in this draft that's going to go late. But yeah, I mean, there's two out of 50% of the podcast right now is a Cowboys fan when no one mentions Jerry Rice's son, but that's neither here nor there. We don't need to touch on that. We can go straight into tight ends and talk Bowers and JT. Kev, what do you got there on Bowers? JT, is there any other tight end that you think is worth mentioning? I think it's 1, 2, and then we'll see what's left over.
Well, I like I love tight ends. You guys, we could talk tight ends for like 2 hours. But Ben Sinnott, I don't know how to say his last name, but from Kansas State, I really like him. We had him actually at 2 in the guide in terms of our consensus rankings there. I think the question is like, what is he going to play? Because he's very versatile. So he might be playing like H-back and fullback at times. So that's really the question mark for me on him. And RAS score really matters. So relative athletic score for tight ends. Like tight ends is really like the other stuff can be nuanced or whatever, but he tested 9.75. He was one of the best tight ends of the class there. So he's a guy to watch. Theo Johnson from Penn State as well. I've watched Theo. He played high school ball in Canada. So he's been developing. I don't know if you guys know, Canada does not have good high school ball. So like he's definitely been developing there. Like it's taken him some time. Like I watched. Now this is how degenerate I am. I've watched huddle tapes from his high school senior year at Canada. Like he was a man amongst boys out there, and like you saw, like over time at Penn State, he did develop into a pretty good receiver, but Franklin is terrible. James Franklin is one of the worst coaches in terms of talent-wise, like getting the most out of his talent. So he definitely struggled there, but he's another guy that's a great athlete, really above average hands. I think he locked himself in. He almost had a 10 on the RAS score this last for the combine, 4.57 40. I think he locked himself in as day 2 guy. Theo Johnson did. I think that he's one of those guys that we might see his name called before Jatavian Sanders, to be honest with you. Like, I think that teams might see his versatility and really like that in his athletic testing because Sanders didn't test amazing. He did enough. He did exactly what he probably should have. But those guys I really like. Sanat, Theo Johnson, Sanders is in there for me too. And, I love this dude because if you just Google him, I love watching his tape. Dallin Holker from Colorado State. I told you guys I'm a degenerate. This dude is so fun to watch. He's old as hell though. Like I'm gonna be honest with you. Like he was a Mormon mission guy, so like I'm pretty sure he's like 25 or 26. But he just looks like a football player, and he's definitely gonna find a role in terms of really good. I think he's an athlete. He's got strong hands and stuff like that. But that's purely just a vibe pick for me. I just like him.
All right, this is probably the happiest moment I've had on the pod because I'm a K-State graduate, Kevin. So I watched a lot of Ben Sinnott last year, and I have been retweeting his RAS scores, which I think was 24th or 25th best out of the last like however many years I saw. But I wasn't trying to be too homerism with him, but
now you can be.
Yeah, now I can because I haven't seen very many people put him up in that top end of the tight ends. And I don't know if it's just awareness. Like I said, I watched a lot of him. When you watch him play, he doesn't have that top end speed or breakaway speed and that prototypical, some of the tight ends we're looking at nowadays in the pros. But what he does is he just knows how to position his body in contested ways. Down in the red zone, he reminds me just in that area. He reminds me a lot of Gronk as far as the way to go up and get balls, the way he's kind of agile in the red zone and the end zone areas. So it was interesting to hear you bring him up because I hadn't heard him talked about very much in the top of the tight end market of the draft class.
He's our consensus tight end too. So we're a little hot takey over football guys right now. So we actually have him at 2. So that's for you, my friend. We like him a lot. I think he's very versatile. And I think he tested well at the RAS. So like, yeah, I'm a big fan. The question I always have with him is like, is he conventional tight end? Because if he is, I think he can score fantasy points. But if he's not conventional, if they move him around a lot, like does he take that U-check role type thing? Then you're like, dang it, like that's kind of where the concern is. But that's baked in his ADP right now. I think that's why he's getting drafted so late.
Oh, I love it. Where do you have Bowers? What's his best landing spot? Or call it top 3, top landing spot.
Well, I mean, Bowers is one for me. I think that, he's elite at the things that he can do there. Chargers are number 1, obviously, for obvious reasons. Like if he can go to the Chargers, fine. I do think the Colts are interesting. I think that he could be the wide receiver 2 on that team. So that's why I really look at it for these tight ends. Like, will they be wide receiver 2 on their depth chart? Can they earn the targets? I would love him and Pittman together. I like Josh Downs, but let's slow the roll on the Josh Downs, like the drum beats a little bit. Like I do think Bowers could come in there and be that guy. And I also, the Jets I think are interesting. I don't know if they do it, and I don't know, I think they're going to go tackle for sure. But I do think the Jets would be fun because him, Wilson, Rodgers in that area being that wide receiver 2, anywhere he can be that wide receiver 2 is great. I don't want him to go to the Titans. If he goes to the Titans, I will never watch football again. I don't think I would ever do it. Like, because that would just be depressing after what we saw with Kyle Pitts. Now we have him with Levis at the Titans. Like, I just want him to go away from that. Please go to a good offense. That's what I'm looking for with him.
Yeah. So I have Bowers 1, JT 2. It's funny that you say Dallin Holker. So I've watched quite a bit of college football, and he's always stood out to me on anytime I would watch Colorado State. So it's funny that you have a vibe, kind of had the similar outlook there. We'll see if it translates to the NFL, but he is a football player. You feel his presence on the field, and he's just a fun guy to root for. Certainly don't think he had the talent that Trey McBride had there, but he's like, he's an interesting, going to be a locker room guy wherever he goes. And sometimes that translates production on the field if he can develop that type of chemistry with a quarterback as well. But yeah, Truck, do you, Shane, have something to add here for the tight ends?
No, I'm just curious. I'm a Ohio State fan myself. Cade Stover, I see him at the top of quite a bit of tight end rankings going into the draft. What's going on with him? What do you see with Cade Stover?
Man, we were doing so well. Then you had to mention you're a Ohio State fan, and like,
Sorry.
I thought we had a good thing going here. We had good vibes,
sorry.
and then
damn.
No, Cade, it's so hard with Ohio State tight ends because you watch them, they don't use them. Like it's so hard to like Rucker. Remember Rucker, the value, and all those guys. Like, I have Cade at 6, so like he's sitting there as someone that definitely can be serviceable. I think really good strong hands. In terms of the at catch point, I think he has ability to get yak because I think he's big enough. And I think he does serve. He's an inline guy, so teams can use him in line and block because he definitely did that a lot at Ohio State. Like that's how they used him for some reason. I thought they could use him as a pass catcher. I think the thing that's always going to kind of hold him back a little bit. I don't think he's a elite speed guy, and I don't know if his route runnings. I don't know if he's a seam guy. I don't know if he's that tight end seam going up the middle type guy. I think he's more that possession kind of guy. He kind of reminds me of Dawson Knox a little bit, in terms of what maybe his role is in fantasy and stuff. But I like him. I think that he'd be a lot of fun. Like if the Bengals don't take a tight end in the first round, maybe they take Cade later. Or hey, maybe they decide they don't want to address that position until maybe 3rd, 4th round. The Commanders, maybe the Niners take a shot on him. Maybe he'll be Kittle's kind of guy, that replacement kind of guy. But Cade definitely fits that role.
Yeah, definitely.
We'll love it. I think we're good here going through those rankings. This could have been a 3-hour episode if we wanted to get in depth. That's what
I told Mike gearing up for this episode. I'm like, just be prepared. This is probably going to be a 2 to 3 hour episode. We're talking every position group as NFL prospects. This could get out of hand.
I think we did a really good job, running through quickly, but also hitting on not only people that we were bullish on, but also just kind of the overall landscape of the position and where they would go in the draft. So I'm very happy there. And you guys heard it from arguably the most studied person in the room with or in the space, with Kevin Coleman, who is watching Canadian high school football to draft his Devy room.
It's not a flex, though. It's not a flex. Let's not make it a flex at all.
But yeah, no, thanks so much for coming on. I think it was a great episode touching on everything we needed to go over to kind of get ready for this NFL draft. And yeah, like we said, there's landing spots do matter, and that's going to change a lot after the draft, which is extremely exciting. I think Shane O'Mac found his new crush in the fantasy space with the Sinet take, and then also
he's going to rewatch.
Cowboys
that 5 times.
Yeah, and then Cowboys. We'll be seeing them flirting online on Twitter over the Cowboys. But yeah, thanks a lot for coming on. Truck, Shane, any last words for Kevin?
No, I'm glad you were able to tell us about some Devy. I found that very interesting, and I can just picture being involved in Devy, going to some junior football leagues. All right, this kid's going to be good. We write him down on the list. This kid is huge, So I find that fascinating and scary all at the same time. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, again, thank you, Kevin. Make sure you go check out Kevin Coleman for the Dynasty Football Podcast on the Football Guys Network. Also, the Devy Royale. Go follow him on Twitter at DuBois_22. Thank you for watching the video. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Kulz, do you have any interruptions before I sign us out? He loves Kevin. He does this all the time. All right. So you're all good. That's the last thing I got to check with. Everybody make sure you know what to do. Buckle up.